In the blistering heat of the Arizona desert, where the sun scorched the earth like an unrelenting forge, a lone figure stumbled through the sagebrush. Her name was Eliza Hawthorne, a young widow pregnant with her first child, her belly swollen like the full moon that guided her nightly escapes from grief. She had fled her homestead after bandits raided it, killing her husband and leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back and a fierce determination to protect the life growing inside her. As she crested a rocky ridge, her eyes widened at the sight below. 5 Apache warriors, bound hand and foot with coarse ropes, staked to the ground by a gang of ruthless outlaws who laughed as they divided their spoils. The warriors' faces were etched with defiance, but their eyes held the shadow of impending doom. Eliza's heart pounded, not just from fear, but from a whisper of empathy that refused to let her turn away. Eliza had grown up on tales of the Wild West, where Apaches were painted as savage shadows lurking in the canyons, enemies of progress and peace. Her father, a stern preacher from Boston, had drilled into her the virtues of kindness as a weapon against the world's cruelty, quoting scriptures about turning the other cheek. But out here, in the lawless frontier, survival often demanded hardness. She was no stranger to loss. Her own mother had died giving birth to her, and now, widowed at 25, Eliza carried the weight of 2 lives. Yet, as she hid behind a boulder, watching the outlaws ride off into the distance, leaving the warriors to bake under the sun, something stirred within her, a universal pull toward humanity that transcended the divides of race and fear. What if these men had families waiting? Wives heavy with child, like her. Children who looked to them for protection. The thought gnawed at her, making her hands tremble as she gripped the small knife tucked in her boot. Cautiously, Eliza approached the bound men. The warriors noticed her immediately, their dark eyes narrowing in suspicion. The eldest among them, a broad-shouldered man with scars crisscrossing his arms like maps of battles won and lost, growled something in his native tongue. She didn't understand the words, but the tone was clear, warning, perhaps even threat. Her mind raced with doubts. What if they turned on her? She was vulnerable, her pregnancy slowing her steps, her body aching from days of wandering. But then, an unexpected turn, a soft cry escaped one of the younger warriors, a boy barely out of his teens, his leg twisted unnaturally from the outlaw's torture. It was a sound not of war, but of raw human pain, echoing the cries Eliza had heard from her own lips during labor pains that had come too early in her grief. In that moment, she saw not enemies, but fellow sufferers in a harsh world. With a deep breath, she knelt beside the eldest, her knife glinting in the sunlight. "I'm not here to harm you," she whispered, though she knew they might not see. "Comprehend? No one deserves this." As she began sawing through the ropes, the warriors exchanged glances, their initial hostility melting into bewilderment. The eldest, whom she would later learn was called Turok, the one whispered about in settler camps as the vengeance devil from the north, for his raids against those who encroached on Apache lands, watched her with piercing intensity. Legend spoke of him as a ghost who struck like lightning, avenging his people's stolen territories with unyielding fury. But here, bound and helpless, he was just a man, thirsty, battered, human. Eliza's hands shook as she freed the first warrior, expecting retaliation. Instead, he rubbed his wrists and nodded solemnly, helping her cut the others loose. The air thickened with unspoken questions. Why would a white woman, pregnant and alone, risk everything for them? It was an act so selfless, so contrary to the hatred that fueled the frontier wars, that it planted seeds of doubt in their warrior hearts. Freed, the warriors could have vanished into the desert, leaving Eliza to her fate. But Turok, the devil himself, gestured for her to follow them to a hidden spring nearby, where cool water bubbled from the rocks. There, in the shade of ancient cottonwoods, an unexpected alliance formed. Through gestures and broken English learned from traders, Turok shared fragments of his story, his village decimated by disease brought by settlers, his wife lost to childbirth complications much like Eliza's fears for her own. The parallel struck her like a thunderbolt, a profound realization that pain knew no borders, that the enemies, on both sides were bound by the same threads of love and loss. As the sun dipped low, Eliza shared her meager rations, a few strips of jerky and hardtack, dividing them equally among the 6 of them. The young warrior with the injured leg winced as Turok set the bone, and Eliza tore a strip from her skirt to bind it, her maternal instincts overriding caution. But the story twisted further that night. Under the starlit sky, as coyotes howled in the distance, the outlaws returned, drawn by the smoke of a small fire the warriors had built. Gunfire erupted, shattering the fragile peace. Eliza, heart racing, huddled behind a rock, her hands protectively over her belly. The warriors fought fiercely, their knives and stolen rifles flashing in the moonlight. Turok, the vengeance devil, lived up to his name, moving like a shadow to disarm 2 attackers. Yet, in the chaos, one outlaw aimed his pistol at Eliza, sneering at the fool woman who had meddled. Time slowed as she stared down the barrel, whispering a prayer for her unborn child. Then, in a blur, the young warrior she had first noticed leaped in front, taking the bullet meant for her. He fell with a gasp, his eyes meeting hers in a final, grateful glance. The battle ended swiftly after that, the remaining outlaws fleeing into the night. But the cost was heavy. As dawn broke, the warriors gathered around their fallen brother, chanting a mournful song that resonated through the canyons. Eliza, tears streaming down her face, knelt beside him, her hand on his cooling forehead. "Why?" she whispered to Turok, who stood like a sentinel. Through halting words, he explained, the boy had seen in her act of cutting their ropes a spark of the Great Spirit's mercy, a reminder that not all paths led to vengeance. Her kindness had awakened something in them, a realization that humanity's power lay not in destruction, but in bridging the chasms of misunderstanding. Turok, the feared devil, confessed his own weariness of endless raids, the cycle of blood that had claimed his family. "You cut more than ropes," he said, his voice gravelly. "You cut chains of hate." The emotional climax came as the warriors escorted Eliza to the edge of their territory, where a settler wagon train was passing. But before parting, Turok placed a beaded amulet around her neck, a talisman of protection, carved with symbols of life and renewal. "For the child," he murmured. In that gesture, born of her selfless act, transformation bloomed. Turok vowed to seek peace with the nearby forts, to end the raids that had earned him his infamous name. Eliza, in turn, promised to share their story, to advocate for understanding among her people. As she watched the warriors disappear into the horizon, a kick from her baby affirmed the hope stirring within her. Her compassion had not only saved 5 lives but had unleashed a different kind of force, not vengeance, but redemption, rippling outward like water in the desert. Years later, in a thriving town built on former battlegrounds, Eliza would tell her daughter the tale, the amulet still around her neck. The Apache and settlers had forged uneasy alliances, trading goods and stories instead of blows. Turok became a legend not of terror, but of change, the devil who chose mercy. In a world torn by division, Eliza's story whispered a universal truth: one act of kindness, however small, can sever the bonds of enmity and unleash the true power of humanity. It reminds us, from the bustling streets of New York to the quiet farms of the Midwest, that selflessness is the greatest strength, capable of transforming even the fiercest hearts. And in that hope, we find the courage to build bridges where walls once stood, leaving the world a little brighter for those who follow.